Hello everybody, for today's presentation I'm going to be discussing Mannerism, which is one of the most important styles of art in European history and key to understanding post-Renaissance painting and architecture. So what is Mannerism? Mannerism is a style of art that evolved during and after the High Renaissance period. So one of the crucial tenets of Mannerism is that it threw out conventional theories of perspective and reality that were seen as standard during the Renaissance. So with perspective, the linear perspective that dominated Renaissance paintings and works such as The Last Supper or School of Athens, that drew the viewer's eyes towards the center, was discarded in favor of a perspective in which the viewer's eyes could wander around the pictorial plane and focus on many different things without a central target. In terms of reality, the ultra-realistic nature of many Renaissance works was discarded for a more experimental style that would allow some non-realistic elements to be incorporated into art. So this is obviously in stark contrast to the classical Greco-Roman artistic values that were idolized during the Renaissance. So things like contrapposto, which sought to depict humans in a perfect manner, perfect realistic manner, were thrown out in favor of experimenting more with the human form. So you had things like elongated figures. You had psychological tension, which you can see in the painting at the top right, in Gisola's portrait of the artist's sister and brother. You see three siblings, and the sister on the right seems to have a small smile on her face. The brother seems to be a little more sullen or serious, and the sister on the very right has a little bit of a smirk on her face. So there's definitely a dynamic and a little bit of a tension there that may have not existed in a Renaissance painting seeking to depict the same subjects. Colors that were intense and unnatural were often juxtaposed with each other. So you would see colors that may not necessarily exist in nature, or ones that almost seemed too bright or too artificial to actually be in the setting, may be used for some sort of artistic value. And lastly, Mannerism also applied to architecture. Often elements that had always been used in a certain manner during the Renaissance and prior to the Renaissance were now used in new independent functions, and it would often contrast with each other to create a more striking effect. So the painting you see here is the Entombment of Christ by Jacopo da Pontormo. It was created from 1525 to 1528, and it's an oil painting. And it depicts Jesus directly after his crucifixion and before he is sealed in his tomb. And right off the bat, we can see it's a classic example of Mannerism. Just by looking at its color, for example, we can see that the clothing that the different figures are wearing almost seems inappropriate for this particular situation. They're bright colors that are in striking contrast to each other, and this is again one of those key elements of Mannerist art, with unnatural and unorganic color being used in a piece. Additionally, we can see here that the different bodies of the figures that are utilized in this painting are very unnatural. That they're twisted around each other, as you can see on the right. All of them seem to be woven within each other, and especially with the arms and legs, it creates that effect of an interlocking of bodies that's so crucial to Mannerist art. Additionally, we can see on the left, especially with the person that seems to be holding up the front half of Jesus' body, you can see it's an elongated figure. It seems almost taller than it may be in reality, and even in the figure squatting on the right, with the legs and the long body with the smaller head, we can see sort of that effect there too. So also, as we can see with these two figures on the top right of the painting, they appear to be standing up or being propped up by some sort of ground, but clearly they're way too high to be standing on the ground. So this is an example of how reality is often discarded in Mannerist painting in order to create the desired effect. Additionally, since we can see that the background in contrast to one of the figures right displayed here, it's clear that there's really no background or nothing in the background, and the focus is completely on the subjects of this painting. And as we know in lots of Renaissance paintings, the background is important. In things like Venus of Urbino, which was a Venetian High Renaissance painting, the background was extremely developed and there was a lot of depth there. Here, the depth is more vertical than horizontal, and it's clear that the focus is on the subjects directly in the foreground, as there really is no background. So for the Mannerist work that I chose to examine, I chose The Burial of Count Argaz by El Greco. It's an oil painting that was created from 1586 to 1588, and it's depicting the burial of a member of the Spanish royalty. So first off, we see sort of in the composition of this painting, it's a painting that you would never see in a classical or a Renaissance period, as it sort of is divided in two vertically, and it has that vertical depth rather than any sort of horizontal depth along the horizontal plane that we see in other works like Into the Atonement of Christ. And the top half seems to be in an ethereal, heavenly dimension, while the bottom would represent a more realistic earth. But just by looking at the top, we can see in the two figures placed centrally, they're placed in unnatural positions, and their bodies sort of seem to be elongated or unnatural in nature. And again, with the little angel that we can see to the right of the centrally placed man, the body is twisted in an unnatural way, and it looks sort of like it has longer legs than it would be in proportion to the body in reality. And again, if we look at the colors of both the top and the bottom, we sort of see bright yellows and reds in contrast to darker grays and blacks. Again, another way to identify it as a Mannerist piece. So in this zoomed in excerpt of the painting, I think we can sort of see all of the elements that would help define it as a Mannerist painting in full view. So we can see the contrast again between the reds and yellows of the robes to the black clothing of the men behind these three figures. And also we can see sort of the elongation of their arms and their torsos in comparisons to their head, creating an unnatural, unrealistic effect. Finally, I think we can also see a sort of psychological hardship in the expressions of the priest and the man next to him, which probably would not be found in many Renaissance paintings that didn't really delve into emotion or psychological conflict in this sort of depth that we can see here.